Hello everybody, how's it going? Happy holidays, Alec here, and welcome to day 4 of Collabmas here on the channel. Our multi-week season of holiday collaborations is in full swing now, and today's video is no exception. I hope you are excited to see the rest of the episodes as they roll out throughout the rest of the month of December. So, video games in 2022. There were some pretty good ones, huh? Today we're going to be talking about some of my favorite games from the past 12 months, and I gotta say, you don't really realize how good of a year it's been until you really, sit back and put it all into perspective. Now, if you've been around the channel for a while, you'll already know that I usually release videos like this towards the end of every year, and you might also be aware that last year's video was the first time that I had someone else with me doing the whole selection process. So, for 2022's Best Games of 2022 video, the one that you're watching right now, I'm happy to report that last year's guest is making a return once again, as I'm also going to be joined by a friend of the channel and just all-around great human being, Kiira.
Hey guys, I'm Kiira. Alec, thank you so much for having me along for this video. I'm pretty sure you probably just said a really nice compliment right now, because that's just the kind of guy you are. You're so nice. And I don't know how to respond to compliments, so you've had this is the second year in a row you've had me on the Game of the Year video. I would not pick me twice, but thank you so much. I guess 2022 has indeed been crazy. I knew at the beginning of the year there's gonna be so many games to look forward to, and I'm so happy that we worked together to make this list, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So, Alec, back to you.
Kiira is just the coolest, and we had such a great time putting last year's list together that we figured we'd just kind of keep the tradition rolling on into 2022. So, now that we've had our introductions, why don't we go ahead and get this 2022 game train rolling, starting with number 5. In all my years of talking about video games and discussing them, I've found that some of my best experiences with them come when I decide to pick up a game just on a whim. The first time this happened to me was with 2013's BioShock Infinite. I knew virtually nothing about it, and when it came to release day, I noticed a few reviews popping up for it online, which reminded me that it had actually launched that day. I knew I enjoyed the first game and figured, yeah, I'll probably enjoy this one too. So, after spending about 5 minutes total from realizing it came out to thinking it over, I drove to my local GameStop, handed over my $60, and then drove home. Immediately after I got home, I started playing, and once I stopped to put the controller down for the day, the credits were rolling and it was 3 a.m. I had powered through the entire story in just one sitting and walked away stunned at how just this little game that I had known nothing about just 12 hours prior suddenly became one of my favorite games of all time. And while I can't say that High on Life is one of my favorite games of all time, I equally walked into it with that same level of naivete I had with BioShock Infinite and a few other games since then. Suffice to say, High on Life surprised me in more ways than one. From a narrative perspective, the game is all over the place, but in a good way. The story starts off simple enough as you, the player character, are interrupted by your sister as she goes through her plans to throw this wild house party over the weekend. In a very just, don't tell your mom and dad type of way. However, it's within about 5 minutes from this point that the game goes from your typical Home Alone sibling dynamic to this balls-to-the-wall alien comedy adventure shooter, and from there, the game never really lets up on that energy. I knew right from that first opening sequence that this game was going to be one I'd be including on this list, and I think a lot of it just comes from the unique brand of character this game has. I haven't been this enthralled with the overall vibe of a game in so long. I mean, seriously, this game just oozes personality. And speaking of oozing, I also just love how everything in the world of High on Life feels just so organic. The world has this general feeling of being so alien that you never really know what's alive and what's just an ordinary object. I mean, I guess that's something that you just come to expect in a world where your guns talk to you. Speaking of the guns as well, a lot of this game's dialogue comes from this blue guy, Kenny. He's a pistol you pick up at the very beginning of the game and actually comes from an alien species that all take on the form of different types of guns. I mean, it's a whole story. Anyway, Kenny is voiced by the real-life talents of Justin Roiland, and for those that don't know who that is, he's both the voices and the brains behind the show Rick and Morty from Adult Swim. And while I'm generally not as much of a fan of the show, High on Life as a whole generally does have a ton of that Adult Swim influence baked into it that I can't deny. I adore it.
Oh, fantastic. You've decided to take a look around Little Cutie Town. Oh, I'm so excited for you to see everything Little Cutie Town has to offer. Oh my god! Oh, oh no, you're destroying everything! Oh my god, you're so big! I didn't realize how big you were compared to our town. Oh my god, it's really obvious now. I just didn't realize how much damage you do. Oh my god, I shouldn't have invited you in. Oh my god, what did I do? That's my childhood home, Mom. That was our power plant, our nuclear power plant. Totally safe, by the way, until you came and triggered the nuclear reaction. It just wiped out an entire neighborhood.
I was initially concerned about the writing feeling too predictable or maybe too annoying, and yet there were actually so many times throughout my first playthrough that left me genuinely laughing out loud. And I know humor is subjective and it all depends on who you ask, but I do think that this game has heart, and it shines brightest in those ridiculous, over-the-top, and just flat-out weird moments that I feel like only High on Life can bring.
RPG, tactical strategy, and visual novel elements all wrapped up with a Digimon bow on top made Digimon Survive super appealing to me, even only just hearing about the game a few weeks before its release. Because, Bandai Namco, they really hit it out of the park with their marketing for this one. Well, Survive is all about survival, when you as the main character and some friends get mysteriously transferred to seemingly another time and space where you meet Digimon for the first time. A majority of the game is reading through the story and making the correct choice when decisions are given to you. But there is also a tactics RPG element that keeps newbies or skeptics of visual novel games engaged. Tactical RPGs and visual novels are among my favorite game genres, so naturally I enjoyed the gameplay loop of Digimon Survive, but I realized that many people online were actually dissatisfied with the fact that the game was mostly a visual novel and less of a tactics RPG, and I agree. I wish the RPG element of the game was more prominent throughout the experience, but nonetheless, I had a blast getting to know the characters and collecting as many Digimon as I could while doing the tactics battles. Collecting Digimon can get tough, as when you find one you want, you need to impress it by correctly answering questions it gives you so that it warms up to you. As I said, reading is a huge chunk of the game, but fortunately the game gave me characters and a story that I cared about enough to want to get through it. I think Survive is a great step in the right direction to get more people interested in Digimon, and with the new Digimon World game coming up next year, this is a good time to dive into the world of Digimon, whether you're a returning fan or a brand new one.
Overwatch is a game that I personally have a lot of history with. I played the first open beta for the game back in 2016 and immediately knew that this was a game that I wanted to dive deep into. I wanted to learn more about the characters, I wanted to master their abilities, I wanted to dive deep into this world that the developers were building. Then, after the game officially rolled out everywhere later that month, that's exactly what I did. I devoted so many hours to this game. I climbed the rank ladder, I was there for every new hero cinematic that dropped, I was online when every new hero released, I played all the seasonal events to death. I was the most present I have ever been for a live service type game like this, and quite frankly have ever been since. Now, as the years went on, I started to feel myself fall out of love with the game. It wasn't a singular experience either. I mean, many other players felt the same way, and professionals even started dropping out of the league. There was just this underlying sense about the community that the devs just didn't care about the game as much as they used to, and from the spotty balance updates to near identical year-to-year seasonal events, the writing was basically on the wall. Then, in April of 2020, the team announced that along with the release of Echo, Overwatch would no longer be receiving any new updates until the release of Blizzard's next big project, Overwatch 2. Now, I'll go ahead and spare you the details of the journey it took to get from then to now, but just know that there was a lot of community pushback and general frustration over the lack of communication the team had with the fanbase. So, flash forward to 2022, and Overwatch 2 is finally out, and the first question on everyone's minds was, naturally, what's different about this one? And the answer is, at its core, not a whole lot. I consider this a good thing, as the gameplay of Overwatch has always been one of its greatest strengths, so to see more of that rock-solid, moment-to-moment gameplay is great. But what makes this foundation even more refined this time around is the change in format. Now, On the surface, going from the 6v6 matches of the first game to the 5v5 team size in Overwatch 2, it may seem like a small change, but it actually makes a whole world of a difference. One of the biggest complaints with the original game was the sort of long-lasting, stall-heavy fights where teams would be brawling for what felt like forever, people would be just shooting at shields the entire time, and it almost felt like nothing died. This feeling is effectively gone in Overwatch 2, and as a result, the game just feels way faster, and it feels like as if you have more of an impact in these fights. Beyond a gameplay perspective, though, there's also tons of new content to dive into. The game launched with 3 new heroes, a few new maps, there's also a 4th new hero that debuted just this month, and the promise of even more in the coming year, which is just great to see after the content drought the game had for the past nearly 3 years. Overwatch 2 also shifted the game into a free-to-play model and is now even more accessible than ever. Of course, we are still in the early days of the game's life, and we still don't have the previously promised PvE mode that is now due to launch sometime in 2023, so it won't be until next year that we really get a full idea of this game's scope. Though, as it stands right now, I love Overwatch 2. It's been an absolute blast being able to scratch my competitive itch again, and the brand new support hero, Kiriko, is probably some of the most fun I've had with this game, period. If you felt like you've had a competitive shooter-shaped hole in your heart, I'd say now's as good a time as any to jump into the world of Overwatch 2.
Square Enix, while diverse in their game genres and experiences, hadn't yet fully dove into the farm sim genre until Harvestella. Remember that Nintendo Direct from this year that was full of farming sims and people beamed it up on Twitter and called it unappealing to them? I respect that, but that Direct was for me, as a huge farm sim fan. And to see Square Enix finally doing their own take on the genre and seeing their art style direction, I was all in the moment I saw the first trailer. Harvestella brings together RPG and farm sim elements in a similar way to the Rune Factory series, but I'll be the first to say that Harvestella offers an even more fun and clean experience to the table. You play as a self-named, self-customized character that wakes up with amnesia, because JRPG, in a place they've never been. After accepting a house and farmland from the townsfolks, which is really generous, I know, your journey of figuring out who you are, where you are, and taking care of the farm you were given starts. Like in any farm sim, you can raise animals, grow crops, forage for goods in the wild, and cook, all while making money by shipping your products. Harvestella does a really good job of simplifying these farm sim staples by making them less tedious. For example, some crops only take 1 day to grow fully, which is super helpful given that the other half of the game involves going into dungeons to advance the story, level your character, and collect loot from monsters, so you'll need crops and cooking in order to keep your health and stamina up in these dungeons. While the dungeon areas may feel a bit linear compared to open world games, I enjoyed the simplicity of them, honestly. I mean, between the exciting music, the hack and slash style gameplay, and the mysterious story throughout the dungeons, I saw myself actually looking forward to the dungeons instead of dreading them like I always had in Rune Factory games. Character designs mean a lot to me as a JRPG fan, and Harvestella delivers with gorgeous character art during its story bits. Square Enix has mentioned that they could continue the series if the first one sells well, so this is me begging you. If you have enjoyed farm sims or even just RPGs in the past, I think you'll enjoy the simplicity and charm of Harvestella.
Scarlet and Violet take place in the Paldea region, a brand new locale inspired by Spain and other Latin American countries. Now, I've always loved the real-life inspirations these games have taken over the years, and Paldea might be one of my favorite regions yet. In addition to having a large map to explore, you're also able to tackle the entire thing in co-op thanks to Scarlet and Violet's brand new multiplayer mode. Accessed via the Union Room, players can host a lobby of up to 4 trainers that, once connected, are able to freely explore not only the map, but also the game's entire story as well. Having this much freedom in a multiplayer session is fantastic, and a huge step in the right direction towards a truly cooperative experience for Pokemon. Another factor that plays into the game's nearly 60-hour campaign is the story, which is quite honestly one of, if not the best storyline the series has ever seen. Throughout my first playthrough of the game, I found myself shifting from an attitude of, oh, okay, yeah, I know where this is going, to one of, they put this in a Pokemon game? Without getting too much into the specifics, the story in these games is one of the darkest and more surprising narratives we've seen yet from a Pokemon game. And it all culminates in the biggest, most bombastic ending sequence that the franchise has ever seen. This whole story plays out while subtly weaving its way through some pretty tough themes for Pokemon, but despite that, the games do a phenomenal job at keeping the player engaged from start to finish, and it's thanks in large part to its vibrant cast of characters. All in all, after 25 plus years of constant, albeit kinda slow, evolution, the Pokemon franchise is getting a huge step in a brand new direction with Scarlet and Violet. Despite its technical hiccups, these games offer so much value to new players and longtime fans alike. From its fantastic art direction, brilliant storytelling, and Pokemon designs that are just as charming as ever, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are no doubt the best Pokemon games on the platform, and certainly among some of the best in the franchise.
Pokemon Generation 4, or more specifically, Pokemon Diamond, was the first Pokemon game I had ever beat as a kid and the first one I had ever logged in over 100 hours. So after years of imagining how cool a Diamond and Pearl remake would be, I was a bit disappointed when we weren't actually getting our Sinnoh remake in the style of Pokemon Sword and Shield. I felt so meh by Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, despite it making my top 5 games last year, admittedly, mostly because of the art style, the grid-based map, and, well, the outright simplification of the contests. But I pretty much forgave Game Freak for treating the Sinnoh remake like a back project the more and more I saw Pokemon Legends Arceus, and plugging 100 hours into the game made me realize that this is the kind of game Sinnoh deserved. Heck, it was the kind of Pokemon game that people had been dreaming about for years. One of my favorite things about Legends Arceus is its setting. Early 1900s Sinnoh, or you could also say Hokkaido, Japan's most northern island, which is where the inspiration for Sinnoh is drawn, and made apparent throughout the game through its clothes and buildings. But enough about aesthetics. What really carries this game for me is the gameplay loop. Catching Pokemon without having to engage in battle every time makes the whole process of completing the Pokédex more simple, but not exactly easy. But any challenge the game threw at me, I was ready to take on. Having a world of Pokemon where you could turn the camera 360 degrees at all times, explore and go nearly anywhere you could see in the distance, and watch the Pokemon in their natural habitat, it was all so exciting, and it felt like exactly the direction Pokemon needed to go. We all knew that the open areas of Sword and Shield were all for this moment, to make Pokemon completely transition into a 3D world, and Game Freak pulled it off here. The game is gorgeous with this watercolor-like haze to it and soft color palette. The game might not run at 60 or even 30 frames at all times, but this didn't take away from my overall gameplay experience. The game just really immerses you, and I truly felt like I was a Pokemon trainer in an old Sinnoh region. Not to mention that this Pokemon game takes my personal award for best soundtrack of any other game in the franchise. I could seriously listen to the Jewel Be Life City track all day. Legends Arceus, with its impelling story, smooth gameplay, and interesting take on my favorite region, makes it one of my favorite Pokemon games of all time.
Gritty, tense, and hauntingly beautiful, Signalis is a love letter to the top-down style of survival horror games of the PS1 era, often referred to as the golden age of the genre. Much like those classic titles, Signalis is a game that thrives off of environmental storytelling. There's no voice acting to speak of, cutscenes are few and far between, and what exists of the story can be obtained only via the exploration of the world around you. Our protagonist, Elster, is thrust into a desolate, unfamiliar world after crash landing onto a remote, unknown planet. After disembarking onto the planet's surface in search of her missing pilot, she accidentally discovers the ruins of a huge, underground industrial complex where she slowly pieces together a government conspiracy far bigger than she could have ever expected. It's definitely not one of those stories that most people will really get on first pass, and trust me, I'm definitely one of those people. But I think that's okay. Throughout the admittedly short 8 or so hour runtime, Signalis' narrative runs the gamut on darker topics such as self-identity, abuse, and various other traumas. Encounters with others are sparse, and when new characters are introduced, they're shrouded in feelings of mystery, deja vu, and oftentimes leave the player with more questions than answers. Working in tandem with the game's presentation via flashes of beautifully grim imagery and a somber soundtrack, It all adds up to an experience that feels less interested in scaring you and more in scaling up that feeling of cosmic dread. Beyond its moody atmosphere, the gameplay of Signalis is also quite reminiscent of classic survival horror. I can't tell you how many times I've made it to one of the game's scattered save rooms just to sit back and really think to myself, okay, I only have 6 slots of inventory, and I don't know what's behind this door in front of me. Should I bring more ammo? Maybe a different type of gun? What if there's a key item and I don't have the space to pick it up? It's these moments of strategic planning that really make the genre for me, and it's partially due to all of the terrifying monsters that you'll see chapter to chapter, further adding to that feeling of dread that I mentioned before. Despite being developed by a team of only 2 people, Signalis has easily become one of my best gaming experiences of the year, and sits comfortably alongside the classic titles it's attempting to emulate. Beautifully crafted and deeply thought-provoking, Signalis takes the familiar template of the genre and runs with it to create something truly timeless and worthwhile.
Sonic the Hedgehog. Boy, we have been through so much together, so many ups and downs, and unfortunately, the last nearly decade had felt really downhill. But that changed with Sonic Frontiers. Even through all of the controversial gameplay trailers and skepticism throughout the entire fanbase, when Sonic Frontiers released on November 8th, 2022, I felt so much relief and hype for our speedy Blue Boy. Sonic Frontiers gives us an absolutely gorgeous and surprisingly huge landscape to explore as Sonic, while he tries to navigate the mysterious Starfall Islands and save his friends. You can jump, run, and grind your way through these giant areas with supersonic speed that feels clean, exciting, and so much better than past Sonic installments. While in these overworlds, you can find gates that will lead you to levels where you can zip your way through to reach the goal. I found these levels more memorable and more fun than honestly any Sonic level that I can think of in the last 10 years. My only complaint with the levels is that I wish there was more variety in the themes, as all the levels are based solely off of 4 past Sonic levels. For example, we have Sky Sanctuary, we have Green Hill Zone. It was a bit sad to get to a gate and just be like, oh, okay, this is my 4th chemical plant in a row. But that's a small sacrifice to make when the overall designs of the levels are super satisfying. Sonic feels great to control in this game, and that alone makes me feel relieved given his past. There were some annoying parts of the gameplay loop. Some of the overworld puzzles weren't fun, and don't get me started on the final boss, but it's fine. It was overall just a relief that the greater majority of the game was an absolute blast. The story is full of Easter eggs for fans of past Sonic games. I mean, I found myself with my heart in my throat at any reference to my favorite game of all time, Sonic Adventure. It was also just fun seeing Sonic interact with his friends in full 3D cutscenes versus the text box and picture-style cutscenes of Sonic Forces. Sega and Sonic Team have proved that if given enough time and resources, they can pump out a great Sonic title, and I, for the first time in a while, am looking forward to the future of the Sonic the Hedgehog video game franchise. Oh, also, big side note, please bring back Kellen Quinn. I absolutely loved hearing him sing for the boss levels. That is a good idea. Bring him back. Thank you. I cried. No, for real. I cried at the first boss because I love Kellen Quinn and Sleeping with Sirens, and my 2 obsessions combining together, it was just too much for me. So please bring it back. I'm begging you.
All right, you guys. We are almost to the end here, and before we unveil our number 1 picks for 2022, I just want to emphasize how tough it was to put this list together between Kiira and I. Like I said, it's been a great year for games, and while there are only 5 that we can include each here, we wanted to put together a little bit of a segment like this that includes some of the honorable mentions throughout the year. Games that, while we really enjoyed, sadly were not able to make our list. So, with that said, here are our honorable mentions.
Sometimes I feel lost or afraid. I try to imagine what he might have said to me.
No matter, your imminent demise is inevitable.
up to you what kind of cult leader you become. Starting a cult is no easy ride. You'll scavenge for resources and battle heretics, but righteous victory will be yours. So guide your flock, grow your power, and spread the word of the Lamb. The darkness will show itself, basking in moonlight. On my honor as a knight, I will end you. We will prevail! Hold nothing back! A worthy adversary indeed!
My number one game of 2022, without a doubt, goes to Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. It is honestly hard to find what I consider flaws in this game. Like, Fire Emblem 3 Houses was my top game in 2019, and every year since then, I've given at least one of the routes another playthrough, and earlier this year, I had finally played through every route and DLC, making for over 200 hours of total gameplay. And I knew it was coming. I knew Nintendo, along with Intelligent Systems and Koei Tecmo, could not pass up making another Fire Emblem Warriors game, especially given how beloved the Three Houses characters are among fans. I honestly hadn't played the first Fire Emblem Warriors, but that didn't matter. I needed more time with my Three Houses characters, so I bought the Japanese Treasure Box edition of the game and dove into my first Warriors game ever. If anything can get me into Dynasty Warriors as a gameplay style, it's Fire Emblem. Running around as Edelgard, Claude, Dimitri, and the other students was such a rush, and I found myself getting addicted to hacking and slashing my way through each exhilarating level. I came into this game wanting more time with my Three Houses favorites, and came out of this game with not only that, but with a newfound love for the Dynasty Warriors style of gameplay too. Getting more time for characters to interact with each other in this game, as if 200 hours was not enough in the previous one, it was a goldmine for me. Fire Emblem games are known for their support conversations, and I did what I could to have my units fight together so that I could unlock their support conversations, just like I do in the original Fire Emblem games. It was also fun to overpower your favorite characters by training them up and unleashing them relentlessly on the enemy when it came to battle. While the story isn't exactly canon, it's more of a what-if kind of scenario, I found myself enjoying how the game stayed true to the lore of Fargus from the original title. It's so crazy how nostalgic this game made me feel, despite the original game only being 3 years old. I tried out multiplayer mode throughout almost my entire playthrough, and it's really nice for player 2 to just be able to pick up a controller and enter your game at almost any time, even just during the story mode. Three Houses will always be special to me, but it's good to know that Three Hopes is around when I want some button-mashing mindless fun. Among staying faithful to the Fargus lore, feeling like Fire Emblem to its core, the simplicity of the battle system and the gameplay, Fire Emblem Three Hopes brought me along for nearly a flawless ride, and that's why it gets the title of my favorite game of 2022.
When it comes to discussion about Elden Ring, I feel that I struggle a little bit. Maybe it comes from the fact that this is my first experience with a Soulsborne game, or maybe it's because any amount of extended discussion will never do this game justice. The thing is, I know this is a great game. I played it, I loved it, and rolled credits on it all within the first month after I got it. And yet, whenever I try to think of the words to describe my emotions for this game, I can't seem to find them. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I'm some sort of brilliant writer, and at the end of the day, maybe it's just that. Maybe I don't have the words to describe it. But I think this would be a great opportunity to highlight the words of one of my favorite creators on this platform. Jacob Geller just recently published a video of some of his favorite games of 2022, and when it came time to discuss Elden Ring, there was one sentence in particular that struck me the most, and it goes like this. Elden Ring is such a monumental achievement that it kind of feels like it comes from another dimension of development. where the ability to create is uninhibited by the factors in our world that hold it back. And that sentence might just be the closest I'll ever get to putting this game into words. The rest of his thoughts on the game are fantastic, and I'll drop a link to his video below. It's great, but what he's saying is true. Elden Ring is a game that is just so vast, so big, so inexplicably timeless that it almost seems impossible that it exists in the first place. In a world where deadlines and sales figures and developer crunch and other man-made problems get in the way of creativity, it is so refreshing to be able to play a game that feels as if it were not beholden to any of those capitalistic tendencies that so often get in the way of the true potential that our favorite games could reach. I mean, think about it. How many times have you played a game that you enjoyed and liked a lot, but ended up thinking to yourself, man, I wonder how much better this game could be if they'd spent just a little bit more time on it. That game that you and I have daydreamed about, that is Elden Ring for me. And I'm not really going to expand much on the story or the characters, the graphics, or any of that because I just don't think it matters when the real beauty of this game is the experience you get from playing it. If you haven't yet, I'd highly recommend picking up this game as it's the closest thing to perfect we got in this past year. Anyways, with all of that said, Elden Ring is my personal pick for Game of the Year for 2022. Well guys, there you have it. 2022 has been an impressive year for video games, and I would go as far as to say that this might be the best year for video games in quite a few years, actually, at least as far as recent memory serves me. Of course, I mean, that could just be recency bias clouding my judgment, but I don't care. I'm gonna say it anyway, 2022 just rocked that hard. But of course, these are just our personal picks for the top 5 games in 2022. What do you think? Did we do good? I mean, are there any games that we may not have included in this list that you feel deserve to be mentioned? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below, as I would love to discuss with you guys. Before we go though, I want to give a huge shout out to my friend Kiira, aka Ginger Gaiden.
Well guys, I hope you enjoyed all of the cool games that came out this year. I mean, at least on my list. We had Fire Emblem, we had Pokemon, this is in no order, we had Harvestella, we had Digimon, we had Sonic. This was the video game year of dreams, truly. Like, so many good titles, and I'm so happy that I was able to make a video with you, Alec. So, hopefully, until next time, I'll see you guys again. I'm Kiira, and thank you, Alec, for having me on your video. Now, specifically go play Harvestella. I want a second one. Do it right now. Okay, that's my outro.
You can subscribe to her here on YouTube, and I'll leave the links to do so all in the description below. You should drop her a follow. She's awesome and just an overall really great friend of mine. Anyways, gang, I think that's gonna be it for this video. So with all of that said, and without further ado, there's only one thing left to say before we take off, and that is, of course, as always, I'm Alec and Stuff. Do your best out there. I'm rooting for you, and I will see you all again in the next video. Bye!
Hi there! Thank you for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, feel free to hit the like button. Subscribe if you want to see more, and hopefully we'll see each other again in the next video. Bye!